If you grew up in the 1980s, you were raised in a decade that promised everything. The future was bright. Technology was exciting. The economy was booming. And your parents believed that if you worked hard enough, you could have it all. Career, family, success, happiness. All of it. You were the generation that grew up with MTV, arcade games, and the space shuttle. You watched the Berlin Wall fall. You believed tomorrow would be better than today. And then you became an adult. And the world got complicated. This is the psychology of adults who grew up in the 1980s. And why your generation carries a unique kind of pressure. Let me explain. The 1980s was the decade of ambition. Greed was good, or so the movies told you. Success was measured in things you could see. Big houses, nice cars, corner offices. Your parents, many of them boomers, were climbing ladders and breaking ceilings. And they expected you to climb even higher. The message was clear. You can have it all. You should have it all. And if you don't, you didn't try hard enough. That belief shaped everything about how you see yourself today. Here's the first pattern. You struggle with feeling like you're never enough. No matter what you achieve, there's always more to do. More to earn. More to prove. You hit a goal and immediately set a new one. Not because you want to, but because stopping feels like failing. The 1980s taught you that rest is for people who gave up. That ambition never sleeps. That your worth is tied to your productivity. As an adult now in your 40s or 50s, you might be exhausted. But you don't know how to stop. Because stopping was never an option. Here's the second pattern. You were a latchkey kid. Both your parents worked, or maybe you came from a divorced home. One of the first generations where that was common. You let yourself in after school. You made your own snacks. You did your homework alone. You learned independence before you were ready for it. And you told yourself it made you strong. But here's what nobody acknowledged. A child shouldn't have to be that strong. A child shouldn't have to figure out everything alone. That premature independence left marks. As an adult, you might struggle to ask for help. You might feel like needing support is weakness. You might have built an entire identity around being the one who handles things. But underneath that capability is a child who wished someone had been there. Here's the third pattern. You were raised on competition. Grades were ranked. Sports were serious. Winning mattered. Second place was first loser. You learned early that life was a race. And you've been running ever since. The problem? You never learned when to stop racing. You compete with colleagues, with neighbors, with strangers on the internet. You compare your house, your car, your kids' achievements. And no matter how well you're doing, someone is always doing better. The 1980s taught you to measure yourself against others. It never taught you to measure yourself against your own peace. Here's the fourth pattern. Your parents were emotionally distant in a specific way. Not absent like the generation before, but distracted. They were building careers, chasing success, keeping up with the Joneses. They loved you. But love often looked like providing, not connecting. They gave you things, toys, opportunities, activities. But quality time was scheduled, not spontaneous. And emotions were something you handled privately. You didn't burden your parents with your feelings. They had enough on their plates. So you learned to manage yourself. To perform being okay. To not need too much. As an adult, you might still be performing. Still managing. Still convincing everyone you're fine. Even when you're not. Here's the fifth pattern. You have a complicated relationship with materialism. You grew up when brands mattered. When having the right clothes, the right sneakers, the right stuff determined your social standing. You learned that possessions communicated success. And part of you still believes it. You might buy things to feel better. You might measure your progress by what you own. You might feel anxious when you can't afford what others have. That's not shallow. That's programming. The 1980s turned consumption into identity. And unprogramming that takes conscious effort. Here's something most people don't talk about. The 1980s looked golden on the surface. But underneath, there was anxiety, Cold War fears, the AIDS crisis, economic inequality beginning to grow. Your parents smiled through uncertainty. And you learned to do the same. To project confidence even when scared. To keep up appearances no matter what. That skill has served you well in some ways. But it's also exhausting. Always performing stability. Never admitting when you're struggling. Here's the generational context. Your parents were raised by people who survived the Depression and World War II. They were taught that security matters above all. So they chased it relentlessly. And they raised you to chase it too. But they also chased something else. The dream of having it all. Career and family. Success and happiness. They wanted both. And they told you that you could have both too. What they didn't tell you. The cost. The burnout. The sacrifices that having it all required. You found that out on your own. Here's where you are now. You're in your 40s or 50s. Maybe you've achieved a lot. Maybe you haven't hit the markers you expected. Either way, something feels off. If you succeeded by 1980s standards, you might be wondering why it doesn't feel like enough. If you didn't, you might be carrying shame that isn't yours. Because the game was rigged from the start. Having it all was a myth sold to a generation that believed it. And discovering that myth in midlife, that's a specific kind of disillusionment. Here's what many 80s kids are realizing now. Success doesn't equal happiness. Achievement doesn't fill the void. And the childhood spent preparing to win left little room for learning how to just be. You're good at doing. You're less practiced at being. You know how to achieve. You're still learning how to rest. That's not a personal failure. That's generational programming. And you can reprogram. Here's what I want you to know. You don't have to keep running. The race you were entered into as a child. You can step off the track. The productivity that defined your worth. You can redefine worth. The independence that protected you. You can let people in now. It's safe. You're allowed to need people. You're allowed to rest without earning it. You're allowed to be enough without achieving more. The 1980s gave you drive. But this era of your life can give you something else. Permission to slow down. Permission to feel. Permission to finally stop performing. You've proved enough. Now you can just live. Before you go, tell me. Did you grow up in the 1980s? Do you recognize these patterns in yourself? Drop it in the comments. And if you're finally giving yourself permission to stop running, comment. I've proved enough. Let's see how many of us are ready to step off the track. You're not alone. And you're not behind. You're exactly where you need to be. And that's enough. It always was.